Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Miriam, and I talk about all kinds of quilt related stuff because I'm a huge quilt nerd. So, last time I spoke with you guys, I showed you how to make a quilt as you go quilt block using scraps. So it's a scrap friendly tutorial. And if you would like to see that tutorial, I'll link it up here in the card, or I will also link it down in the description box so it's easier for you to find there if you want to watch this through first and then go back and watch that first tutorial. So um, this video is going to be focused on actually putting the quilt together. So we're going to add the backing to our quilt blocks as well as sashing. I know sometimes adding sashing to quilt as you go blocks sounds kind of intimidating for some reason, or it's kind of got this weird stigma around it that it's difficult, but it is not. It's actually a super simple tutorial. So I'm really excited to show you guys this if you can't tell. So I went ahead and made my first row just so I could show you what to expect here. So this is the first row. I'm just making a small baby quilt, and it's going to be about 38 inches square when it's all finished. So we've got our quilt blocks, and I've just added a very thin white sashing strip in between each block. And that is doing two things. It's kind of adding a little detail, a little interest to the actual quilt design. And it's also, more importantly, concealing those raw edges of our quilt blocks. So this is what the front looks like. And then on the back, I've got our beautiful backing fabric. And that I'm also going to show you how to add that, because when we first made our quilt blocks, it just looks like that. So see, you can see the quilting on the back of that quilt block. So we're going to add our backing squares and our sashing, and we're going to make several rows, and I'll show you how to sew the rows together as well. And we are going to get the quilt almost made. It's just going to need binding at the end, so which I will do another tutorial next week on how to add binding, which is really fun too. I love binding. But anyways, let's hop on over to the cutting mat, and we will go over fabric requirements and that sort of stuff. So let's go do that. I'm just going to go over quickly the fabric that you will need for this quilt. So if you want to make one just like the one I'm making, which is going to be a 38 by 38 baby quilt, you will need 16 of your quilt blocks. And I've cut these down to 9.5-inch squares. So I'm going to use 16 of those. And then I also need 16 backing squares that are also cut at 9.5 inches square. So I'm using this really pretty Tula Pink backing fabric, which this just feels so nice. It's so colorful and beautiful, and I'm really excited to see what the backing will look like of this quilt because I just love this fabric. So we'll need that. Then for the sashing, for sewing the blocks together in rows, we are going to need 12 2-inch by 9.5-inch rectangles. So I've got those here cut. Then we need 12 1-inch by 9.5-inch rectangles. And that's going to be what we need for those vertical sashing pieces. Then for actually sewing the rows together with those horizontal sashing pieces, we need 3 2-inch by about 38.5 to 39-inch strips. So they're going to be long strips. I cut mine at 39 inches long. And then if there's extra, I can trim it off after I've sewn them together. I just wanted to make sure that they were long enough and there wasn't going to be any unnecessary tension at the end of the strip. So we need 3 2-inch by 39-inch strips, and then 3 1-inch by 39-inch strips, which I have cut here. Now, after you have all of your strips cut, you're going to take all of your 2-inch strips from the 9.5-inch strips and the 39-inch long strips. You're going to take those to your ironing board, and you want to fold all of these in half and then press. So it's kind of like you're making binding. And that's just with the 2-inch ones. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to take all of my 2-inch strips and just press them real quick so they're all pressed in half. And then I will meet you back at the sewing machine. I am at my sewing machine and we are going to start sewing our sashing onto our quilt blocks. I did also want to mention that I wrote a blog post about how to add sashing on my website, stitchobsessed.com, and I will also link that tutorial in the description box below. So if you'd rather learn by reading the instructions and seeing photos of each step, then that option will also be open to you. So we are going to start adding our sashing to our quilt block. So I'm going to take my first block of my row, and I am going to also take a backing square for that block, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that on the back of the quilt block. You want it right side facing up, and just line up those edges. And you want to cut your backing squares the same size as your quilt block so it fits perfectly, just like that. And I'm going to flip this back over. Now I am going to add one of my 2-inch folded strips to the top of the quilt block. And we're going to go on the right side here. This is the right side of the quilt block. And I'm going to line up the raw edges of the strip with the raw edges of the quilt block. And I'm going to hold that in place and flip this over. So my 2-inch strip is still on the right side here on the block. We're just on the back of the quilt now. And now I'm going to take one of my 1-inch by 9.5-inch rectangles, and I'm going to place it right sides together with the quilt back. Now, if you want to, you can clip these in place just so they stay in place while you're sewing. So I would just add a clip here just to hold those ends in the right spot. Maybe one at this end also. And then you could add one in the middle just to make sure they stay in place. And now we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this edge of the quilt block. And this is attaching our sashing on the quilt top and on the quilt backing at the same time. I'm going to go ahead, and you don't have to back stitch these stitches because they're going to be concealed with the horizontal sashing later. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this down. Okay, so this is what it'll look like. So that's our 2-inch folded piece, and then our 1-inch piece on the back. Now I am going to take this and I'm going to fold the 1-inch piece over that seam allowance, and I'm just going to press that real quick. You can either finger press it if you would like to just finger press, or you can have your iron set up and just press it real quick with your iron. I have my iron right over on the right of my sewing machine, so I'm going to press that real quick just so it's pressed down nice and flat. So I've got that pressed, so now it's laying flat. Now we're going to grab our next quilt block. Our quilt block is right facing up. I'm going to flip it over to add our backing piece. Line it up perfectly like that. And then I'm going to take our first block here, and with the block right side up, we're going to take that sashing and we're going to place it onto the backing. And you want to make sure the blocks line up on either side. That's going to make sure that you don't get wonky edges here. So I'm going to line up that little 1-inch sashing piece with the edge of the quilt block, and then I'm going to stitch a 1/4-inch seam. And then if you open it, ta-da! There you have that beautiful thin sashing on the back. It looks really nice. It looks intentional. It doesn't look kind of like, oh, well, that was an afterthought. It looks really good. So now all we need to do is we need to take that, our 2-inch folded piece, and we need to fold that back over. See, we're concealing, you see, here are our raw edges of our quilt blocks here. And this is going to conceal those edges. So we're just going to fold this over. You want to make sure it's laying flat, but you're not pulling it too much. So you just want it to lay flat. You don't want to pull it. I'm going to go like that. And I'm just going to clip the ends here in place real quick, just to hold it in place. And now I am going to stitch on either side of the strip. I'm going to do what's called top stitching, which is basically a 1/8 inch seam allowance from the edge. So you want it really close to the edge, and it just gives it a really nice finished clean look. Make sure that this is laying down, but I'm not pulling it. See, there's one side done. Now I'm just going to do the other side. And there we have our first sashing strip. Doesn't that look nice? There's the back. Looks cute, huh? All right, now let's add our next quilt block. So we're basically just repeating these steps as we're adding our blocks to the row. So first I need to grab my 2-inch folded piece, and our backing's already on there, so we don't need to add the backing on this one. And we're gonna lay that raw edges with the block. I'm gonna flip it over, holding those fabrics all in place. And then we're gonna grab our 1-inch strip and place it right sides together with that. Clip in place. And then move it over to underneath the needle. You can always lift that up and peek and make sure it's lined up, which it is. We're gonna do our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we take our 1" and we press it. Then we're going to get our next block. I'm going to flip it over, add our backing piece. Then we lay this right sides together with the backing, right sides together with the other backing. And we're going to line up that edge of the 1" strip with this edge of the quilt block. And we're also going to make sure that our top and bottom edge of our blocks are lined up so nothing goes wonky. And then again, 1/4" seam allowance. And open that up. Another beautiful thin white sashing piece. And then we just fold this over to conceal those raw edges. There we go. Another block added. We've got 3 of our 4 blocks already. So now I'm going to add our last one. And there we have an entire row made. Looks great. Can't really see it. Here, let me move the camera up. All right, there's our row. So now I am just going to sew our other 2 rows together, and I'll do like a fast forward thing, and then we will sew those rows together using our long sashing, and that'll look really cute and be really fun. So I'll meet you in just a little bit. so now we have all of our rows sewn together. So I just have them off to the side here. I've got them all on top of each other. This is my first row, second row, third row, and fourth row. So I've got those already, and now we are going to sew the rows together using our horizontal sashing. Now, the fun part is we are using the exact same technique as we did with sewing the short vertical sashing pieces. We're using the exact same technique to add the horizontal pieces. I am going to move the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. And then we are going to continue on with making this quilt. Let me move this wire out of the way. Oh, I'm a very professional over here, very professional. So this is our first row. All right, so this edge up here is the top of my quilt. So I don't need to add sashing there. That's going to be concealed later on when I add binding. So I'm going to add my sashing to this edge down here. So I'm actually going to turn this so it's facing like that, just so it's easier for me to work with here. And so this is the top of the quilt, and this is where we're adding the sashing. So I am going to grab my 2-inch folded strip that's 39 inches long, remember? And I'm going to lay that on this edge with the raw edges on the raw edge of the quilt block. I am also going to take my 1-inch strip and I'm going to place that underneath here, and I'm going to line it up. Make sure that you can see that. I'm going to line it up so it's on the edge. So we've got the edge and the edge, and I'm going to go ahead and clip that into place just so that does not move. Like that. And then I am just going to keep continuing on down the line of lining my my little strips up with the edge of the quilt blocks. Like that. Just like that, see? And I'm just going to throw a clip in ever so often, just so we're holding those strips in place, so they're not shifting as we're going down the line. And if you kind of hold it, if you hold it up like this, you kind of let gravity work with you here, and it'll kind of hold the strip down in place like that, and then you can just kind of grab it with your fingers like that. And then I'll grab the other strip and line it up. Just kind of like that. See? And then let me move my clips over here. And then I'll just put a clip in it just to hold them in place. And then I'm just going to keep on doing that. Line that edge up. Line these edges up. And clip it in place. So as you can see, this is the exact same thing that we did when we were sewing our blocks together. It's a much longer piece. And you could use this technique to add sashing to any size quilt that you want to make using this quilt as you go method. I'm just going to line those up. See, they're all lined up on both sides. Throw a clip on it. I'm going to just finish that up here. That. Line that up. Okay, so now my edges are all lined up all the way. See, there's little extra little tails on each one of these. That's fine. We'll cut that off later. I just wanted to make sure these strips were long enough for this process. So now you can see I've got the sashing clipped and in place. And now we are just going to turn the sewing machine on, and I am just going to sew all the way down that line using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Move the camera down here so you can see. And I am just going to do that here. I got to remove this. Make sure those are still lined up. All right, and now let's sew. As I'm going, you might notice that the sashing kind of puckers a little bit. All you need to do is kind of just give it a very gentle pull. You don't want to pull it so tight that the fabric is actually stretching. You just want to give it a gentle pull to make sure that it's not puckering anywhere. And then just continue sewing. And you'll see me do that as we go along. And there we have it. I'm going to go ahead and cut those little tails off just so they're out of the way. All right, and then we have our sashing just like we did when we did our vertical ones. So what we're going to do is just like we did with the other ones, I'm going to turn this over to the back of the quilt, and I'm going to fold our 1 inch piece over like that, and then I'm just going to press it over using my iron just so it lays nice and flat for the next step. Here's my next row. Here's the top of the row, and the bottom of the row is closest to me. And I am going to flip this over. So now this is the top of the row, and that's where I want to line up my 1 inch sashing strip. So see, this is the top of the row. I just want to make sure that I'm making sense. This is the top of the row, and we're lining up that sashing piece with that top. Just as you're sewing these together, just make sure that those edges stay lined up. That's the important thing. All right. So then when we open that up, see our sashing horizontally? That looks really nice. And then on the front, we've got our folded piece now that we need to fold over. So I'm just going to do that here. Fold it over like that. And I think I'm going to press this real quick with my iron just so, since it's such a long piece, I just want to make sure that it's staying flat as I'm stitching it down. Now that's pressed, that's going to stay down a little bit. You can also pin these in place if you would like, just so it doesn't move, but I'm just going to wing it. All right, so just like before, we're going to top stitch all the way down. Okay, and then I'm just going to do the exact same thing on the other side. And look at that. We've got 2 of our rows sewed together. Oh my goodness. Looks so cute. I love it. All right. Now I'm just going to continue adding our rows until we are done. So we're already halfway done. It's just a very small quilt. So I am going to add the next rows and I will speed it up and then I will meet you back very soon. Okay, so I just finished adding the adding the sashing here to our quilt and look how cute this is. This looks beautiful. Perfect little baby quilt. There's the back. I love how the sashing kind of breaks up the back. It kind of gives it a little bit more interest, and I just love these little rainbows and circles and stuff. So that is how you add sashing to Quilt As You Go quilt blocks. So next week I'm going to add the binding to this quilt and maybe we'll do something else because that probably won't take very long in the tutorial. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know in the comments if you liked it, and really if there's something you would like to learn how to do, or if you have questions about something, I am happy to take suggestions for video ideas and things like that. So just thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. Bye guys.